You're with the BBC World Service and live from London, NewsHour with me, Tim Franks. There have been protests across Barcelona after 9 Catalan separatist leaders were today sentenced to between 9 and 13 years in prison. The jail terms were handed down in Madrid by the Spanish Supreme Court and came after the 9 had been found guilty of sedition for their role in the unauthorised independence referendum of 2017. At a news conference in Brussels, where he's currently living in self-imposed exile, the former Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, condemned the judicial process.
The Supreme Court's ruling against the members of the government, the parliament, and the most important social institutions in Catalonia confirms the strategy of repression and revenge against all the Catalan citizens who sought democratic ways to make their will possible.
Juan Fernando López Aguilar is a member of the European Parliament with the governing Socialist Party, and he says that those who were given prison sentences today were judged not for their beliefs, but because they broke the law.
Everybody could see how justice was done with all guarantees: presumption of innocence, legal aid, of course the right to defense, and with all those guarantees, the Supreme Court of this great constitutional democracy, which is Spain, has found those which were charged guilty of those particular criminal offenses. Of course, we are aware that we have been living in a pluralistic society for centuries. The Spanish constitutional democracy is precisely about bringing together pluralistic identities, securing self-rule, not only for Catalonia, for other regions and nations within Spain, because there are a number of regions in Spain which legally claim themselves to be nations. So it's perfectly legitimate to be for independence, it's perfectly legitimate to be nationalist. But
within
to break
constraints,
every possible law and to disobey rulings of the Spanish Supreme Court and to the Constitutional Court is a criminal offense. And you know what? Those who called for that referendum not only called for an unauthorized referendum, they called for a referendum that had been declared illegal and thus forbidden by the Spanish Constitutional Court. And despite the fact that the Spanish Constitutional Court had forbidden that referendum, they actually called the people to go massively rallying in the streets and defying the security forces which were compelled to prevent it from happening.
And yet, as you are aware, that is precisely their argument, is that because what they say is the flawed state of Spain's constitutional democracy, they had no option but to hold an unauthorised vote, because under the Spanish constitution, an independence vote is by definition illegal.
Is that a problem?
Well, it is a problem if you're saying that Spain is a pluralistic democracy, but you can only be pro-independence within certain constraints. And the constraint is that you can go all the way up to saying that we want a vote on independence.
Catalonians, just like other Spanish peoples within the pluralistic Spanish social fabric, have been voting their self-government for 40 years now. They voted in referendum their self-governing statute in 1971. They voted a second one, much broader, much larger, in 2006. Claiming to deepen self-governance is perfectly legitimate and perfectly democratic in Spanish constitutional order, but calling for a referendum that has been explicitly forbidden by the Constitutional Court has been deemed to be a criminal offense by the Spanish Supreme Court. And that is the case that has been judged under the rule of law in this particular precise case. In many other countries, no such referendum would have ever taken place. Of course, there have been claims in Bavaria, in Germany, there have been claims in Veneto, in Italy, but insofar as the respective constitutional courts forbid that referendum to take place, that was the end of the discussion. Should the rulers of those particular regions step forward in clear contempt of the rulings of the judiciary, of course there would have been a judicial process, which does not mean that we don't have a political problem. Of course we do. But in order to discuss a political problem, the first thing is to expect for those in power, for those that have been invested with political authority through the democratic process, to respect the law. If they do not, they would be held accountable before the law and before the judicial system of this country, just like everybody else. That is the situation we have at sight.
Juan Fernando López Aguilar.